and welcome to Simple Machines. The objective of this lesson is to identify the 6 simple machines: lever, pulley, wheel and axle, inclined plane, wedge, and screw. So a lever is just a bar that is bounced on a point, and we call that point a fulcrum. A fulcrum is right here. The load is applied to one end, so as you see over here, and the force is applied to the other end of the bar. So you've probably seen lots of levers at different points in your life and not realized it was a simple machine. These are all examples of simple machines. Bicycle brakes. You've got a fulcrum that exists right here, not necessarily in the middle like in the illustration that we saw, and you apply the load or the effort on the arm, and that's what causes your brakes to stop. Then over here we've got a seesaw, which is just your typical lever. We see the fulcrum in the middle where it meets the crossbar, and then you have a force applied to one side and the load is lifted on the other. Another example would be the hammer arms. We use hammer arms as levers where the fulcrum is actually the head of the hammer here where it turns, and then we use those arms on the hammer to pull nails out. Another example is a pair of scissors. Notice that screw in the middle, that would be the fulcrum. We apply the effort here and the load is transferred here. We also have a wheelbarrow, which actually contains 2 simple machines. But right here we see that the load is applied at the bottom, the effort is applied in an upward motion, and this one, the fulcrum, is all the way at the end. And if you've ever seen The Emperor's New Groove, it's just a funny little reminder that levers make a difference. And then we have a wedge. So a wedge is just a pointed material, and it's essentially used just to separate 2 other things. So by looking at the illustration, you might be thinking, wow, don't have any of those laying around, but you would be surprised. Real-world wedges are typically things with sharp edges, so things like axes that are used to split wood, and push pins that are used to split down into things like bulletin boards or corkboards or even your wall. We also have knives. Those are wedges. They have a sharpened edge that if you are trying to cut vegetables or cut meat, you're going to need that sharp edge to split them. And then we also have things like chisels and doorstops. These are all examples of wedges. Next, we have an inclined plane. So an inclined plane is a ramp that is used to increase the distance that a load is moved in order to decrease the work that's required. So you might be able to think about quite a few examples of these already. We see inclined planes all over the place. Anybody who uses a moving truck or anything along those lines has probably laid down the tailgate or the ramp. And that's because sometimes it's really hard to lift those boxes straight up and into the truck. So we use inclined planes. It increases the distance that it has to be moved, but you don't have to do quite so much work to move it. Wheelchair ramps are another example of inclined planes. It's not easy to just go upstairs in a wheelchair. You would have to apply a lot of force and a lot of effort. Whereas the inclined plane, it'll increase the distance a little bit. You got to start further back, but it's going to make it easier to get up those stairs. Slides are also inclined planes. Skateboarding ramps are inclined planes. There are plenty of other ones that you can probably think of as well. Next, we have a wheel and axle. So a wheel and an axle, it's just a wheel that rotates around a rod to make work easier. There are some kind of counterintuitive examples of wheels and axles that you have never probably considered as a simple machine. A door handle is a wheel and axle. Notice that the wheel is the knob that you actually turn, and it's connected to a rod in the middle. And then on the other side, there's probably a door handle too, which is what causes it to turn. Rolling pin functions as a wheel and an axle. There's a rod that goes in the center, and you roll it along the, not really wheels, but that's what these would essentially function as a simple machine. An obvious example of a wheel and an axle would be on a car. You actually have a steering wheel. It's not called that just because it's a fun word, but it's because this steering wheel right here actually has a rod that's connected to the back of it that determines how the wheels will shift. Ferris wheels, you've got the whole thing that circles around the one point in the middle, and pencil sharpeners actually function that way as well. Pulleys. So pulleys are a really great tool to use if you're trying to lift a load a high distance. Now, I don't mean a long way, I mean a tall way. So a simple machine that uses grooved wheels and a rope to raise, lower, or move a load. So you see things like in a well. You use a pulley to lift the bucket. Obviously, you're not going to go try and jump down the well every time to get the water because, one, it'd be really, really hard to get back up, and two, that would take a long time. So what they do instead is they have rigged a pulley. So all it is a rope that goes over this stationary wheel, and it pulls down, and you apply the effort to the rope, and then this is where the load is. Same thing here, flagpoles. You've got the pulley at the top, and if you've ever noticed on a flagpole, it almost looks like a loop of rope. So you pull on one side while the flag, which is the load, raises on the other. We also have bike chains. Bike chains function as pulleys, and fishing rods. If you've ever reeled in a fish, you have used a pulley. And next we have screws. So a screw is just a simple machine that consists of an inclined plane wrapped around a rod. So we've talked about inclined planes already and how it's like a slanted surface. These grooves on the screw are actually just one long inclined plane that has been wrapped around a rod. So obviously we think of things like actual screws that we use to put things together. We also have these little nifty gadgets that are in vending machines, the ones that will spin just a little bit and then your candy falls out. That is technically a screw. We also have light bulbs. The bottoms of light bulbs, you have to screw them in. And then we have things like jar lids and container lids. They all have little tiny screws on the inside. And then finally things like a faucet. This functions just like a screw on the inside. It turns down and then it turns back off, just like a screw would to open and close the flow of water. So in summary, simple machines make work easier. The 6 simple machines are levers, wheel and axle, screws, pulleys, inclined planes, and wedges. See if you can think of other inclined planes and simple machines.